Here is your script written as one single paragraph with punctuation corrected only. No words have been changed, added, or removed, only punctuation and sentence flow have been fixed. Hong Kong, Kylin District, 1971. It's 11:45 of the night. The air in this corner of this world isn't breathed, it's chewed. It's a dense mixture of cheap incense, moisture stagnant, and that metallic smell of oil, burnt smoke floating above the stalls. Street food stalls selling noodles. We're not in a film set lit by large spotlights, nor is there a crowd waiting for an autograph. We're in a private office hidden behind a warehouse of fabrics that smell of dust and secrets. There is one golden rule here. There are no press, there are no armed bodyguards, and above all, there is no room for error. What is about to happen between these four concrete walls will never have had to come to light. In this business, one false step means the end of a race, or the start of a war bloody in the streets that no one can to win. I spent 30 years as a coordinator by specialists in Hong Studies Kong. I saw everything, from the choreographies from old school wood to the digital cinematography precision. My work, it was always about distinguishing who was a true warrior and who was pure camera trick, pure editing, and wires hidden. I'm a skeptic by profession, someone who doesn't believe in miracles or in legends inflated by the Department of Marketing. But what I heard from those few witnesses in calling me, he forced her to remain silent for decades. I speak today because I have nothing left to say, to win by lying. That's all I have left. Accuracy of the facts that the industry preferred to bury under layers of convenience and contracts of confidentiality. And all this, although it seems incredible, it started 3 weeks ago before that night with a simple envelope black left on the windshield of a silver Mercedes. Why the man, the most dangerous member of the 14K Triad, would accept a defeat in less time than it takes a sigh? That's the question that has tormented to the underbelly of Asia for 50 years. And the answer has nothing like what you've seen in the movies. To understand the weight of it that happened, we need to understand the moment. Bruce Lee had just returned to Hong Kong. He was no longer the dancing boy Cha-Cha nor the supporting actor in the United States United. It was a phenomenon that was breaking box office records with the big boss. But in the Hong Kong of the 1970s, cinematic success did not only attracted fans, it attracted the masters of the shadows. The Triads, specifically the 14K organization, they controlled practically everything, from the water supply in poor neighborhoods even to the territories where they were setting up the film sets. If you wanted to film a scene on a street specifically, you paid. If you wanted your teams did not disappear during the at night, you paid. But Bruce was different. He had that arrogance, magnetic, a confidence that bosses criminals interpreted it as a fault of respect for the established order. A high command of the 14K, a man who in the whispers from the bars called for the Titan due to his enormous muscle mass and his history of having subjected others actors through physical extortion, decided that Bruce should pay his dues of protection. It wasn't just about it was about money, it was about control. They wanted it. 20% of their future earnings. It was a sentence of servitude disguised as business agreement. But Bruce, instead of calling the police, which in that time was often on the payroll of the same criminals, or to hide after an army of lawyers, he did something which no one expected. He summoned the boss to a private place, a basement in Kowloon, far from the bright lights of Golden Harvest, away from prying eyes. When the black envelope reached his hands, Bruce's loved ones felt the cold of fear. They knew that facing the 14K was like signing a death certificate. However, those who were there say near him those days when Bruce was he prepared with a calmness that was disturbing. He wasn't training any more harder than usual. He was simplifying his movements, he was eliminating the unnecessary. The night of the encounter arrived. The basement, it was a makeshift gym, with the cold cement floor and a single light bulb that swayed slightly, casting long shadows on the walls. The atmosphere was electric, of a tension that could be cut with a knife. At the entrance, 2 Union bodyguards, men with scars that told stories of real street fights, blocked the only one exit. Inside there were only 3 more people, a film producer, whose I prefer to omit his name, a man who at that moment he was so terrified that he could barely hold his cigarette. Old Wing Chun master who served as a neutral mediator, a figure of respect that both parties accepted, and of course the Titan. The boss of the Triad was a mountain of muscle. It represented the old belief that the size, fear, and number of followers surpass any type of individual training. It was maintained by standing with absolute confidence, openly mocking height Bruce. For him, Bruce Lee was just movie magic, a little man who was making strange noises in front of a lens, but it wouldn't withstand a blow real of someone who is killed with the bare hands. Bruce, on the other hand, it was the silent force. There were no insults from him, no stances were taken dramatic. It was there with its economy characteristic movement, representing what I call the absolute evolution of combat. His gaze was not fixed on the eyes of Boss, but in the center of its mass, reading every microtension of their muscles. The mediator established the rules that were as simple as brutal. Bruce would allow the boss he would approach within striking distance. No, there would be a prolonged exchange of blows, there would be no assaults. The bet was clear. If Bruce failed to neutralize the boss's attack intention in a single movement, would accept all the Triad conditions. 20% of her life would belong to the Union. It was a perfect mind trap. The boss thought that due to his weight and strength, Bruce did not. I would have a way to stop him with just one impact. What was going to be tested that night, it wasn't a technique that you could learn from a manual of karate. It was something deeper, a concept called Fagan, the force explosive taken to a level that the science of that era simply could explain. The Titan began to invading Bruce's personal space. It moved with the slowness of a predator who knows that his prey has nowhere to go. He stopped less than an arm's length from distance. The silence in that room, it became sepulchral. You could hear the dripping from a pipe at the bottom of the warehouse and the accelerated heartbeat of producer, who was sweating profusely in a corner. The boss smiled, a full grimace out of pride. He raised his right hand, not to hit it yet, but to put it over Bruce's shoulder, a gesture of domination. I have you in my palm. It was a tactical error born from the pure arrogance. He underestimated what he had it in front of him. He believed that the fragility, the physical sensations I perceived were real. And then the part that should never have happened, came to light. It was such a movement faster than the human mind can barely. He managed to process it. There was no scream. There was no preparation for war obvious. In the fraction of a second in that the boss's fingers brushed against the fabric from Bruce's jacket, the air seemed vibrate. What few people know is that Bruce, he did not back down. He did not try to dodge, intercepted the intention before it turned into action. In the blink of an eye, applied combined nervous pressure with an almost imperceptible hip swivel. It was a real-time anatomy lesson. The giant's arm that had broken bones in dark alleyways, it was suddenly left hanging useless, like if the cables that connected it to the brains would have been cut off by invisible scissors. The Triad boss. He froze. He felt no pain immediately. I felt something much worse. The absolute lack of control over his own body. He looked at his arm with a mixture of horror and disbelief. No, I could understand how a 30-kilo man lighter than him. He had disarmed him without not even close a fist. The silence that he continued, not out of respect, but because of an absolute terror of the unknown. The bodyguards at the door gave a step forward, his hands searching instinctively what they wore under the jackets. But the old master of Winch Chun raised a hand arresting them. The deal was only one movement and the movement had already executed. But pride is a difficult disease to cure. Head bodyguard, a man who he thought he was smarter and stronger than the boss, broke protocol. He couldn't to accept that what I had just seen was real. For him it had to be a trick. Psychological manipulation or a point lucky pressure. That's trashy theater, he shouted, launching forward with a blow right in Bruce's face. Here it is. Where legend separates from reality of cinema. Bruce didn't make a pirouette, he didn't do a flying kick. He stood firm in his place with the feet slightly apart, absorbing ground energy. What happened then came the first big payoff of that night. The moment when the power of fear died before the power of absolute precision. The bodyguard, he never got to touch it. Bruce executed it, which the world would later know as the 1-inch blow, but not in a display with wooden boards, but directly into a man's sternum loaded with adrenaline and bad intentions. The sound was not an impact. It was a dull thud, as if an iron hammer would have struck a piece of raw meat. The man did not fly because the air, like in Shaw movies, brothers. It collapsed exactly where he was standing. His knees hit the concrete and his eyes widened, searching for air for his lungs, collapsed by the shockwave of they couldn't process the impact. At that moment, the head of the Triad understood the truth is, Bruce Lee wasn't fighting with them. Bruce Lee was with them, sparing life. Every fiber of his being the body was trained to destroy, and however, he had chosen the measure just enough to neutralize without killing. The criminal's arrogance evaporated, leaving only the silent plea in her eyes. But this was only the beginning, because in the world of triads one such humiliation is not easily forgotten. And what happened in the minutes what followed was what truly sealed the deal destination of this story in the archive of Hong Kong's forbidden myths. The air in the basement became even colder, and for a few seconds nobody dared to breathe. The silence that followed the bodyguard's fall was louder than any scream. In that basement of Kowloon, time seemed to thicken, becoming something physical that could feel it in your skin. The man on the ground, it didn't move to attack. It writhed, searching for a breath of air that the body refused to process. The blow of 1 inch hadn't sent him to the other side of the room, but there was transmitted such concentrated energy that their organs had simply entered a state of shock. For seconds nobody dared to breathe. The other men of the Triad, hardened in 1,000 alley fights and violent extortions, they stayed petrified. It wasn't fear of a weapon, it was something deeper. It was the fear of what that you cannot understand. Everyone knew what does a karate chop or a boxing punch, but what they ended up the witness didn't fit into any well-known category. It was a move so short that if you had blinked it you would have lost. And there was Bruce. No, he was in an exaggerated fighting pose. I wasn't shouting or celebrating. I was simply standing with your shoulders relaxed. And that look that seemed to pass through people, their breathing, it was rhythmic, almost slow. It was the image, the same as the energy economy. In my career as a doubles coordinator, I have seen hundreds of actors try to imitate that calm, but they always end up they seem tense. Bruce's situation was different. It was the calm of someone who knows exactly how much power it has and the most important, how to control it. The boss of the Triad, the man they called the Titan, still holding his own arm right with his left hand. His face had gone from the red of anger to a pale ashen. He was no longer the hunter. He was a man who had just realized who had entered the cage of a tiger thinking it was a cat domestic. The nervous pressure that Bruce had applied minutes before, it was still taking effect. His arm was no more than a dead weight hanging from his shoulder. But then the part happened which most accounts omit. Second bodyguard. One more guy, young and with bloodshot eyes, blood from the rage of seeing his humiliated colleague, put his hand under his jacket. The gleam of steel emerged the light. It was a butcher's knife, short and heavy, a tool designed to end discussions in a definitive. The producer who was in the corner let out a muffled groan. The rules had been clear, no weapons. But in the world of organized crime, the rules only exist while you're going winning. The moment you lose the honor, the rules are thrown out the window. The young man lunged towards go ahead, not with technique, but with the desperation of someone who wants to erase their my own shame, stained with blood. What would happen next was a display of what that Bruce called the art of fighting without there was no clash of forces. When the knife descended in an arc violent, Bruce simply wasn't there. He moved with a fluidity that made that the attacker appeared to be moving through molasses. Bruce knew he punched the young man in the face. Instead he used the same inertia as the aggressor. With a circular motion of his wrist, he caught the man's forearm and using a minimal lever but perfecta redirected all that force towards the floor. The sound of the knife hitting the concrete was like a bell that announced the end of the young bodyguard finished his performance, face down against the cement, with the arm caught at an angle that it prevented any reaction. Bruce neither, she wasn't even looking at him. Her eyes, they were fixed on the Titan. Protection, Bruce said in a voice so don't worry, it was hair-raising. It's something you need from me, not the other way around. It was the final psychological blow to you. In a single sentence, Bruce had reversed the entire power hierarchy in that room. The boss of the 14K, the man who controlled entire districts, he understood at that moment that his reputation hung by a thread. If that the story came from there, if it was known that an actor had disarmed his best men and had left him crippled temporarily with a single finger, the empire would crumble. Other triads, how would Sun Yan or Wing smell the weakness, and they would begin a massacre through the territory. This is where the story takes a dark turn. And that's the reason which many remained silent about. No, it was a money agreement that sealed the deal. I made a pact that night. It was an agreement, mutual survival. Bruce didn't want one war with the mafia. He just wanted that they should let him work in peace, that he will allow Hong Kong cinema to rise to a global level. And the boss needed that night was erased from memory collective. Those who were there say so, that the chief, with a supreme effort of will, signaled to his men so that they would leave. There were no more threats. There were no more threats in the Mercedes windshields. The Titan, he simply nodded, an almost imperceptible respect forced by the physical reality. The mediator, the old man Wing Chun master, took a step to front and escorted Bruce towards the exit. When Bruce went on air, Collins was damp that night. It didn't look like a man who had just won a battle. He looked like someone who had just finished a workday especially heavy. She climbed on her car and disappeared into the alleys illuminated by neon, leaving behind an office that would never be the same again. The detail that no one mentions is what happened to the producer. He spent years denying that meeting it would have happened. But on the nights of filming, when the alcohol started to loose, tongues in the bars of Tsim Sha Tsui told the story in whispers. He said that the most impressive thing, it wasn't Bruce's speed, but the sound of the impact of the blow an inch. He said it was a sound who did not belong to the world of cinema, but to something older, something primordial. The world never saw the recordings from that night because they simply did not exist. In 1971, there were no camera phones or camera security in every corner. What had happened in that basement of fabrics? He lives alone in the eyes of those who were there. But the consequence was real. Triad stopped bothering Bruce Lee. They realized there were men that could not be bought, and that in a direct confrontation of muscle mass and the numbers mean nothing compared to scientific precision and a will unwavering. The lesson it teaches us this episode, and what I learned after decades of watching camera tricks, is that true mastery is not about how many battles you can win, but of how many can you finish before let the first blow be truly thrown. Bruce Lee proved that ego is a paper armor when faced the reality of an absolute discipline. In that room, the power of fear, he died before the power of precision. I often get asked if Bruce was really as good as they said. My answer is always the same. There was a dragon on the screen, but on the reality, in those moments of shadows where there was no audience, it was something much more terrifying. He was a man who had mastered time and space. That night in Colin, the Titan did not lose alone a bet. He lost the illusion of his own invincibility. And Bruce didn't win only their freedom from the Triads. He confirmed that his philosophy, the Jit Kunito, it wasn't just theory for the books, but a tool of survival in the most hostile world and unimaginable. The world can go on debating their records or their movies. There may be skeptics who they say it's all part of a myth carefully constructed by the studies to sell tickets. But I was on those sets. I spoke with the men who had the scars of that era. And I assure you of something. The silence that surrounds that night in 1971, it is the greatest proof of its veracity. Because in Hong Kong, when something is that's a lie, everyone's shouting. But when something it's true and it's dangerous, silence is absolutely. That's the story that the industry preferred to bury it. The day on that the dragon didn't need to breathe fire. It only needed 1 inch of distance to change the rules of the game always. That at the end of the day, what happened there real or enough to replace everyone who was in that room. The world may doubt, but who he was there, he never forgot it.